Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen Kingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King.
Each week I'll review one of Stephen King's entries in the chronological order of publication, and this week I review 1983 illustrated short story, Cycle of the Werewolf. Cycle of the Werewolf is a incredibly short read. I just finished reviewing last night the Pet Sematary, the book, and Christine the movie podcasts, and I sat down today just to start Cycle of the Werewolf, forgetting how short it was, and I finished it in like a half an hour. And so basically, if you haven't read Cycle of the Werewolf, what it is, it's just a collection of vignettes, really, with powerful illustrations by Bernie Wrightson.
It's going to be a very short review, but in order for me to get to the review, I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary. The story is set in the fictional small town of Tarker's Mills, Maine. A werewolf is viciously killing people and animals, and a strange incident takes place at each full moon. The otherwise normal town is living in fear. The protagonist of the story is Marty Coslaw, or Coleslaw? Coslaw? Let's just say Coslaw, an 11-year-old boy in a wheelchair. The story goes back and forth from the terrifying incidents to Marty's youthful day-to-day life and how the horrors affect him. In July, the town's Independence Day fireworks have been canceled. This is very upsetting to Marty, who has been looking forward to them all year. Because he feels bad for him, Marty's uncle Red. That's an error, Wikipedia. The uncle's name is not Red in the novel. His name is Red in the movie, played by Gary Busey, but it's Uncle Al in the book. So Marty's Uncle Al brings home some fireworks, warning Marty to set them off really late so his mother won't find out. While outside enjoying his own private Independence Day celebration, the werewolf attacks Marty, who manages to put out the monster's left eye with a package of black cat firecrackers. The werewolf escapes, and the police ignore the report because they're looking for a human murderer, not a werewolf. As the summer continues, the bloodshed occurs every full moon. Fall comes on, and so does Halloween. To celebrate, Marty goes trick-or-treating. While out, he sees the Reverend Lowe wearing an eye patch. Lowe does not recognize Marty, whose face is covered by a Yoda mask. I don't understand how he doesn't recognize Marty being the one in a wheelchair, but that's beside the point. Over the next few months, Marty sends the pastor anonymous letters asking why he doesn't just kill himself and end the terror. In December, he sends the last letters signed with his name. Unbeknownst to Reverend Lowe, Marty has convinced his somewhat reluctant uncle to have two silver bullets made and to come spend the night at New Year's Eve, which falls on the full moon, conveniently, with him. Right before midnight, the werewolf breaks into the house to kill Marty and shoots him twice with the silver bullets, managing to completely blind and finally kill him. A little background that really helps explain the former is that the novella started out as a calendar with illustrations by renowned comic book artist Bernie Wrightson. Each month would review a new drawing by Wrightson complete with a short vignette by King, but King found the size of the vignettes, which were both small and extremely limited, to be a problem. So he proceeded with a short novel and had it published in 1983, complete with the Bernie Wrightson illustrations. So that explains that.
It's a tale composed of 12 chapters, with each chapter including 3 Bernie Wrightson illustrations, starting off with a 2-page black and white introduction to the month that shows the landscape and gets us just kind of, it's what would be the calendar, right? You know, it's just a perfect representation, beautiful illustrations to that particular month, followed up by a full-page colored representation of the main action beat in that particular chapter, most of the illustrations depicting a werewolf of some sort, and then a concluding half-page black and white to just wrap it up. And whether it's intentional or not, King matches Wrightson's illustrations with pictures of his own, shaped not by pencil, ink, or paint, but through vivid imagery and descriptive language that's really just as powerful as his artist collaborator. Most of the chapters are self-contained vignettes, their own werewolf stories, complete with a beginning, middle, and end. Just a series of one-and-dones that happen to take place within the same small town of Tarker's Mills. Not to be confused with Chester's Mill, by the way, a town famous for its dome. But then halfway through the book, we're introduced to Marty, and the story starts to take on more of a traditional narrative. But here's the deal. This is not something that I would really recommend to someone that hasn't read Stephen King, that wants to get into Stephen King. I would probably even recommend some of the novels that I don't like that much over this one. Up until this point, I've reviewed Cujo, which I came down pretty heavily on, I would recommend Cujo over this, because this just feels undercooked. The imagery is beautiful. Stephen King paints some incredible pictures, but if it weren't for Bernie Wrightson's art, I wouldn't go out and buy this. This feels like like an outline for a larger story that he never gets around to. It just feels like a treatment for ultimately what will become the movie Silver Bullet. And I get it. It was designed to be something else, and he retrofitted it in order for it to be a short like novella. But it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel full. It doesn't feel finished. It feels like I said, undercooked. The Wikipedia summary puts more of a structure on it than actually exists. Like I said, Marty doesn't show up until halfway through the novella, and he doesn't even really appear that much. The only thing that we know about him is that he's in a wheelchair. He seems like a likable kid, but he's only there to service the story, and that's not something that King really ever does. His characters always stand on, really bad phrase, but I mean, his characters, really are the ones that are out there, front and center, and they, they're the ones that drive the story. It's not the other way around. And here we have the plot driving our characters forward, and not the characters driving the plot forward. So that, to me, kind of shows why this kind of feels out of sync with what I feel Stephen King is capable of, and has demonstrated himself to be capable of up until this point. It just feels generic. It doesn't really have a stamp of King. I mean, it takes place in a traditional Stephen King small town. It's populated by Stephen King type characters. Has a small boy. I'll get into the Kingisms later. But I mean, the werewolf attacks, they're beautifully rendered. They're described great. But they're just, they're just the kind of werewolf attacks that you'd see in any werewolf story or any werewolf movie. I mean, even the title sounds like just some random werewolf, story. The cycle of the werewolf. King is great, and I've said this before, or maybe it hasn't. The podcast hasn't come out yet. I don't remember which one that I've done. It's just that in Stephen King is really good at titling his books, whether it be Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Christine, Cujo, Firestarter. A lot of his books, later he's really good at titling his books that get to the heart of, what the...
Running a business is hard enough, so why make it harder with a dozen different apps that don't talk to each other? One for sales, another for inventory, a separate one for accounting. Before you know it, you are drowning in software instead of growing your business. This is where Odoo comes in. Odoo is the only business software you'll ever need. It's an all-in-one, fully integrated platform that handles everything: CRM, accounting, inventory, e-commerce, HR, and more. No more app overload. No more juggling logins. Just one seamless system that makes work easier. And the best part, Odoo replaces multiple expensive platforms for a fraction of the cost. It's built to grow with your business, whether you are just starting out or already scaling up. Plus, it's easy to use, customizable, and designed to streamline every process, so you can focus on what really matters: running your business. Thousands of businesses have made the switch, so why not you? Try Odoo for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Story is. This, to me, Cycle of Werewolf, while it describes the story perfectly, it sounds more like a Dean Koontz book. And nothing against Dean Koontz. I like Dean Koontz. I like Dean Koontz a lot. But his books just tend to be kind of generic. And the Cycle of the Werewolf, it's just, to me, it's a boring title. I think this is an example where the movie, really improves upon the book. I mean, Silver Bullet is a much better title than Cycle of the Werewolf. And so I'm glad that Silver Bullet exists, to kind of one up Stephen King, because Silver Bullet has that dual reference. Anyway, it's if not for the pictures, and the pictures are fantastic. They're beautiful. Whether it's the black and whites or the full color, I tend to prefer the black and whites. They're insane. It's insane how good Bernie Wrightson is. If you haven't gone out and read Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein, please do, because the level of detail in his artwork is, I've never seen it before. I haven't seen it again. I would say that this comes in as a close second to what Bernie Wrightson is capable of. And Bernie Wrightson's later going to continue to work with Stephen King. It's a great collaboration. We see again his work in The Stand, his black and white, and he'll return for Wolves of the Kala in the Dark Tower series. But it's a good collaborator to have, and looking at his artwork is truly the highlight of the reading experience. So I'm just gonna very quickly go through it. I started the review as I was taking notes. I was gonna take notes on every single one of the months, but I'm not gonna do that because there's really not much to say about each of the chapters. But I do want to start with January. I came down on King, but look, his descriptions are so rich and vivid. It's powerful. It's just really good writing. And he starts off right away with just great imagery in the opening chapter of January. So he writes, "Somewhere high above, the moon shines down, fat and full. But here, in Tarker's Mills, a January blizzard has choked the sky with snow. The wind rams full force down a deserted center avenue. The Orangetown plows have given up long since." I just think that's a very effective, way to start. It really puts you in that setting. I can feel the cold. I can see the plows. I just feel like I'm there. So, like I said, I've come down on it, but it's enough to hook me and to keep me reading. King begins his werewolf story with an homage to the genre's folkloric roots. Our first victim is a railroad worker stationed in a remote shack in the midst of a snowstorm. While it takes place in contemporary times, it could just as easily take place hundreds of years ago in some dark and dangerous European forest. The character, Arnie Westrom, even sounds like some folklore character, thinking of the bad omens that had plagued the land. And gleefully, King presents this little experimental treat of words and pictures with the concluding paragraph in the January chapter. And it's pure, Uncle Stephen, the fireside storyteller that tempts us. Like in the review of Night Shift, I talked about the persona that he has, akin to what Stan Lee had with comic book readers, addressing them as true believers. Stephen King calls us constant readers, and this to me just sounds like a great introduction to like an EC Comics styled story. So he writes, "Something inhuman has come to Tarker's Mills, as unseen as the full moon riding the night sky high above. It is the werewolf, and there is no more reason for its coming now than there would be for the arrival of cancer, or a psychotic with murder on his mind, or a killer tornado. Its time is now. Its place is here, in this little Maine town where baked bean church suppers are a weekly event, where small boys and girls still bring apples to their teachers, where the nature outings in the Senior Citizens Club are religiously reported in the weekly paper. Next week, there will be news of a darker variety. Outside, its tracks begin to fill up with snow, and the shriek of the wind seems savage with pleasure. There is nothing of God or light in that heartless sound. It is all black winter and dark ice. The cycle of the werewolf has begun." So I said that sounded like a EC Comics introduction to a certain extent, but as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, like, who does this sound like? Who does this sound like? Oh, Rod Serling. This is such a great introduction to what would be like a Twilight Zone. In the February chapter, you gotta think poor Stella. Not only does she spend Valentine's Day alone, but Valentine's Day also happens to fall on a full moon. well, I guess she isn't truly alone, with the werewolf taking on what's more traditionally a vampire's role, appearing before a woman's window at night and being invited into the bedroom itself. I don't really have much to say about March, but April is a great chapter. The scene with the werewolf running out from behind the bandstand and the kid realizing that he's truly alone, and it's just, I mean, there's really not much to say other than it's done really well. In May we're introduced to Reverend Lowe, who has a bad dream, and it's very obvious that he is the werewolf at that point. And then in June, our victim encounters the wolf right before he changes. And I think that's kind of anticlimactic due to the fact that King all but spelled out for us who the werewolf was in the previous scene. To emphasize the point, Alfie, our victim, refers to the werewolf as the beast, the same terminology used by Reverend Lowe the chapter before. In July, we meet our main character, wheelchair-bound Marty Koslaw. With this chapter, King ditches the previous done-in-one approach and lays down the foundation that will begin to carry through until the end. It's no surprise that this is the longest chapter so far, with trademark King character development of Marty, of Kate, of Grandpa, and Uncle Al. The decision to put Marty in a wheelchair, it's a smart one. We've seen what a werewolf can do to an able-bodied child, which places Marty in even more danger, knowing that he lacks the ability to run from a predator. However, his ingenuity is enough to combat the beast, and it's the fireworks, the symbol of freedom, that push the werewolf back. He may be physically confined to a wheelchair, but spiritually he's free and powerful. By the time October rolls around, the characters realize they're in a horror story, fully acknowledging the existence of a werewolf. In November, King confirms our suspicions as Lowe is realized to be the werewolf. And then ultimately, the story just goes on until December, and the end comes with Marty taking out Reverend Lowe. So we have a couple Kingisms here. I'm sorry, guys. I mean, I honestly don't have much to say about Cycle of the Werewolf. It's not even 20 minutes. So for Kingisms, number one, you have untrustworthy preachers. Sylvia Pitson is an untrustworthy preacher as seen in The Gunslinger, most recently Charles Jacobs in Revival. Number two, kites as bad omens. In the previous novel, Pet Sematary, there's definitely a scene where the kite is the last good memory that Louis Creed has, and here, flying the kite it is the last act of a child's life. Number three is our child hero. We've seen before in the form of Mark Petrie, of Danny Torrance, Jake Chambers, and very, very soon, Jack Sawyer. And number four is the magic of childhood combating a supernatural threat. This is most clearly on display in the pages of It, but King definitely starts to get his feet wet here, where you have a child character truly out of his league, trying to fight back something that no one really is equipped to be able to take care of, including the adults. And it's only through the magic of childhood, in this case the belief in silver bullets, that'll do the trick. So that's Cycle of the Werewolf, everyone. Like I said, it is a story, and it is written by Stephen King. It is beautifully illustrated by Bernie Wrightson. So before I wrap up this week's episode, how about I read a viewer or a listener email? This comes from Dwayne. Dwayne writes, I just listened to the Cujo review at work, and I couldn't wait until I got home to respond. Let me preface that Cujo was my first King book, and then I read it when I was 14 years old. So I viewed it through that prism. I also recall that it was, in fact, the darkness that drew me into the world of King. I definitely wasn't turned off by it, because the idea of things in life not working out in the end pretty much reflected my childhood up to that point. So perhaps King's coke-fueled rage novel clicked with this kid from a broken home. No boo-hoos necessary, I turned out fine, but I wanted to point out that a person's viewpoint and threshold for ugliness can be shaped and diluted by their surroundings. Regardless, I do like happy endings and pretty things, but if we get that as a reader all the time, it's just not realistic. I have not read Kudo since that first time, so it's likely that my view of the novel would be different upon a reread. But I also read many of authors of extreme horror, so it's difficult to shake me up. Love the show. Write back if it compels you, because I'd love to discuss. Thanks, Dwayne. Dwayne, thank you again for writing. And this is the kind of email that I love to get, because so much of, it's just like you said, so much of what we take away from the book is what we give to the book. I've often said that the reading experience is it's a dance between the author and the reader. It's the reader has to do a lot of work as well. It's just not up to the writer to put everything out there. So, I don't recall disliking Cujo the first time I read it. It's only now that I'm maybe older, maybe a little bit more sensitive, like I've said before on the podcast. So that's definitely a possibility. But I don't know. I definitely don't blame anyone that does like it. But I definitely agree that a person's viewpoint can be shaped and diluted by their surroundings. It's a really good way of putting it. And I do agree. I do agree that if you get the happy ending all the time, it's just not realistic, and it might be too safe. I did respond to Dwayne, and in the response, I referenced Dean Koontz. I think that it's one of the major differences between King and Dean Koontz, because King plays for keeps. He's able to devastate the reader with major loss, and then Koontz tends to play nicely, wrapping everything up in a nice little bow. And nothing against Dean Koontz. I do like Dean Koontz, and I feel like I'm getting deja vu. I think that I mentioned something like this in another podcast review where it's kind of like a backhanded criticism of Dean Koontz. But I like Dean Koontz, but I just feel as though I remember when I was younger and I was reading all the Stephen King books and I started reading all the Dean Koontz books, I just remembered that, everything turned out kind of a little bit too nicely in the end of Dean Koontz, and it just kind of led to the fact that it wasn't necessarily as memorable as it could have been had it been, like I said, a little bit more played for keeps, which is what King does. King can just really be heart-wrenching at times. And then Dwayne wrote in, you'll be doing your Cujo movie review next, so I can't wait to hear your opinions on the film. At least we get a happy resolution with that ending. I think that this film adaptation is one of the better entries in the King page-to-screen universe. I watched it well before I ever read the book, and it scared the hell out of me. Imagine my disdain when years later I wound up moving next door to a house that had a mean, old, loud St. Bernard. Stayed away from that pooch. I enjoyed the movie. It definitely wasn't as, to me, it's not as good as what I believe the benchmark is with The Shining, but it's certainly not as bad as Firestarter. But it's definitely, it's enjoyable, with some really, really good scenes in there.
It was effective. It was effective. So, Dwayne, as always, thanks for writing in, which I think is a great segue, because if anybody else wants to write in, feel free to do so by writing into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. Or you can follow along at Instagram, on Blue Sky, on TikTok, or on Facebook. And if you have any free time, head on over to Apple Podcasts to write a review. That would really, really help out the podcast. So everyone, just thank you for listening this week. I apologize because it's not even a half an hour. It's a short episode. But the good news is you have the entirety of the collection of Stephen Kingcast at your disposal, and you can just click next, which will take us to next week's episode, when I review Silver Bullet, which is starring one of the two Corys, Corey Haim. And in the meantime, may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next week where MOON spells Stephen Kingcast.